Welcome to the Love of the Star podcast. I am Bobby Belt, Dallas Cowboys insider for 105 through the Fan in Dallas, your radio flagship home of the Dallas Cowboys. Joined, as always, by former Super Bowl winning NFL scout Brian Broaddus. He is now the co-host of the G-Bag Nation, 2 to 7 p.m. Central, Monday through Friday on 105 through the Fan in Dallas. He is also the co-host of the Dallas Cowboys pre- and post-game show on the Dallas Cowboys Radio Network. And he's also the co-host of the Draft Show, which is now out of season. Brian, did you find yourself, now that we're in the wake of the draft, did you find yourself this week feeling a little empty inside, feeling a little football empty?
Yeah, I was a little football empty, but I have to introduce you too. This is Bobby
You don't
Belt.
have to.
I do. Bobby Belt of Sean and RJ, 5:30 to 10, Monday through Friday on 105.3 The Fan. He is also the Dallas Cowboys. He is the insider for 105.3 The Fan for us for the Dallas Cowboys. He also is on the Draft Show. He also is on this great podcast, which you folks have so graciously allowed us to continue to have success with. So, Bobby, to answer your question, yes, I am having some draft. I tell you what's happened. I've got to the point now where I go home and I'm thinking, and I've got so used to being able to listen to games on the radio, like whether it's the Stars or the Nabs at the time, or I got so used to listening to games, and I started with my other subscriptions and stuff to kind of find games. And so I sit in there, instead of watching them, I listen to them because I was watching tape at night. So I'm listening to games, watching tape. And now it's just listening to games. It's like I'm like 1957. Like
You haven't come into the modern age and watched the games again?
I haven't started back watching the games. I'm fascinated by the games like in Sacramento and Golden State at the time. I was listening to those games. I find myself not even watching them. I listen to sports on the radio like I'm a old man that I am. How about that?
Yeah, like listening to where you've seen A Christmas Story, where you like listening to the Little Orphan Annie radio drama.
Yeah, it's just
sponsored by Ovaltine and Geritol.
Only the shadow knows, and so that and yeah, it's. But there's a little bit of it's funny about working in radio like we do, but there's a little bit of, and this is going to sound corny, but there's a little romance to it. There's a little romance to the guys and gals that do this, that cover these teams, that talk about their teams and are part of the radio broadcasts. And it makes it almost like I've got to the point now listening to baseball where I could hear if it's a hit or not by the bat, just, and if I can tell if it's like a weak hit, or it's like, oh, that one's got a chance, or that's a base hit. But I've got to the point now where, and I listen to like hockey, I can tell by the way the voice of the announcer, as it goes, the crescendo of it gets louder. Oh, the puck's loose. Oh, goal! And so you kind of you get a rhythm with the way that the call is being made. So there's something special about that. But yeah, I haven't gone back to watching sports yet. I just listen to it now.
You'll come back into the modern era soon enough.
I will eventually, but not anytime soon.
We have Cowboys rookie mini camp. Coming up this week. And for those of you watching this on the YouTube, you can drop in the comments section the Cowboys rookie you're most intrigued by heading into rookie minicamp this week. But just as a quick reset first, Brian, explain what rookie minicamp is, what all they'll be doing, and then we'll dive into, once we have an understanding of what rookie minicamp is, the guys that we'll have an eye on this week and the things that we'll be looking out for.
Well, under different administrations, it meant different things. I remember being out there working for DallasCowboys.com during the Jason Garrett administration. And this was Des Bryant's, I want to say this might have been Des Bryant's first year or second year. I mean, it was his first year or something.
Rookie year where he got sick.
And so, camp means something to different people. And the way they compete in camp means something different. And there was a time where they would go out, they would get all the draft picks. They'd have a few selected veteran players that maybe were practice squad guys that they would invite to camp or be a part of camp. And then they go out and get a bunch of guys they were, looking to like work out or try out guys. And there used to be like real competition. Like you would see like kind of one-on-one, whether it be pass rush, whether it be wide receivers, corners. You saw them actually running plays against the defense. Under the Mike McCarthy administration, it's a lot different process. And I just, in watching it, it was always more about teaching. It wasn't so much about competition or seeing if so-and-so could cover, can Junior Fehoko, blow by somebody on the pass rush? Could Overshawn, is he going to cover? Is he going to cover Deuce Vaughn out of the backfield? You're going to see that one-on-one stuff. It's completely different with this crew. This is more about teaching, and where you see more competition is the actual mini camps itself when the veterans get with the rookies. And we only have the opportunity where they have 3 days of it they use. Well, they only let us watch like Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday they send us on our way. So it's a totally, depending on the staff, it's a totally different approach. Again, Jason Garrett administration, it was like, wow, Des Bryant's out here throwing up. And then, Micah Parsons is just kind of standing here like getting coached by former coach George Edwards on where he needs to line up. And there's, it's now where you will see is what you can learn is where guys might line up. That part of it you can get from the rookie mini camps.
So with that in mind, then where guys might line up.
Did I ruin your approach today with this?
No, that's the approach I was.
Am I wrong?
No, you're right. That's exactly how I just wanted to set that up so people had an understanding of it, because I still think there are things worth learning this week, things worth seeing, and things worth knowing based off of even that being the rookie minicamp. The first thing that I'm interested to see based off of that definition, Brian, is what kind of work, what kind of coaches, which position coaches are working with DeMarvion Overshown? Is he a lot of pass rush training? Is he working closely with Scott McCurley? Are there going to be secondary coaches walking in, talking to him about some safety stuff? I'll be very interested to see how many different coaches are working directly with Overshown, what all they're teaching him. Does Adam Dirty step up? Is he teaching him stuff about trench work if they're going to use him as a pass rusher? I think that's something to watch out for this week.
No, I think you're right. And to me, that, there are things you can get ideas from of where guys might be placed. And you could also get the idea too of, and like I say, there's not a lot of that, that one-on-one stuff where you could kind of say, okay, well, so-and-so looks good. Now you could get the drills and things like that, the movement and some of the things. You could also see where guys are lining up on special teams that maybe they'll have an idea. Maybe you'll get an idea about what Deuce Vaughn. Do they think Deuce Vaughn could be a punt returner? Do they think Deuce Vaughn could be a kickoff return guy? Do they, where do they place, some of these guys in order for you to get an idea of where they might, once that they get together with the veterans, and then you'll see them and how. But this to me is all about an acclimation period. And then you're right. How many different things are you going to see from these guys when it comes to where they're lining up? Mozzie Smith, do you see him playing all one technique? That inside shoulder of, the guard and the center right there? Or do you see him playing some three? There's some other guys. And I'll tell you what, we'll get an idea too about some of these other rookies that, that were undrafted. And I know from a fact that a lot of these guys were on their draft boards. The first guys they go after are these guys that were on their draft boards. So, we'll see when they start throwing guys in, how much they really feel like, okay, this is a guy that maybe we'd like to take a big look at when we get the opportunity, when we become a full team.
You talk about Mozzie Smith. We heard from Will McClay about tweaks in his stance and how that could get some pass rush ability that he wasn't able to get. Is that something we should be watching out for this week? Maybe seeing, does Adam Dirty have him working on different stances, working on his hands a little bit? Are they teaching him pass rush moves? Do you think that a lot of what we'll see with Mazi Smith, if we're keeping a keen eye on the coaching, that a lot of it's going to look like, that looks like pass rush instruction more than anything else here?
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. Now, the thing that's hard for us as the evaluators and where they make us stand, if they put us along the, near the building where we're near the weight room, where they make us stand on that field right there. They have a grass field and the turf field, and the defense and offensive linemen work way down at the other end of the field. Now, you can get great evaluations of running backs. I mean, you'll get to see a lot of
linebackers.
You'll get, Overshown. You'll get to see a lot of Deuce Vaughn. That will be down at our end. But you better bring your field glasses or your binoculars if you're going to watch what's going on. And that's a good idea to remind me to, if you really want to see what's going on. And there used to be a time during the pandemic, remember they put us on the top of the weight room. So then you could really see, like both fields, but you had a better shot of seeing all the way down the field, which
if they work out if they work out in Ford Center, if they're inside,
Ford Center's good too. Yeah, but McCarthy, we've learned this about McCarthy, is he likes to get outside as much as he can. So if we catch some potentially bad weather, then you go inside to the Ford Center. But don't they have like the Country Music Awards thing going on at the Ford Center this next weekend?
Yeah, but not by not that day, not by Friday or whatever it is that they get.
Well, Friday, Saturday, we have to set up like stages and stuff like. That's one of the great things about working for the Cowboys. You just never know who is going to show up at the Ford Center.
We saw them come home for training camp last year, and they were working out around a graduation stage in the Ford Center. You remember that? The graduation stage was in the other. Now, we're a week out, but Brian, as I'm looking at it now, next Friday, there is a 60% chance of rain, thunderstorms next Friday. So maybe the weather forces us inside. One more thing that
All right, get ready for this, Bobby. You know what's going to happen? We're all going to have to load up in our cars Friday, Saturday, or whenever the weather.
Go to AT&T
Stadium, where you and your daughter saw Ed Sheeran last night, right?
Yeah, he was great. The 9-year-old loved it. She got very emotional for a lot of.
That's what I'm saying. I just the Cowboys, they are not afraid to take opportunity to showcase their indoor practice facility for Country Music Awards and stuff. This is great.
They do love it. Last one that I'll be watching for as we head into this. I'll be interested to see what all Mike Solari has Awesome Richards doing.
Yeah.
Because he told us that he was somebody who could play all 5 spots. So I'll be interested. Do we see him out there? Is he snapping the ball? Is he working both left and right, pass sets? Is he working tackle guard? So I think that's another one that, sure, is there a lot we can glean by watching Luke Schoonmaker take instruction? Probably not. But I think there is. What kind of pass rush instruction is Mazi Smith getting? What all coaches are working with Overshown? Awesome Richards, how many different spots does it look like he's getting work at? I think these are the types of things that we'll be able to glean out of rookie minicamp.
Yeah, you're right about that. You mentioned Richards. Will there be any reps where he gets to play maybe some guard? And I think it's all going to be teaching stuff. It's all going to be alignment stuff. It's not going to be anything about competitive reps. Even though Nick Eatman always, when I was at DallasCowboys.com, said I can make a walkthrough practice into an award-winning a piece of work. Thanks to David
you were like you're like those NFL.
Oh, I was a sensationalist. I can.
Your team could go 5-11, and NFL films the recap of the previous. And it sounded like you were this close to the Super Bowl.
You had one hand on the Lombardi as you were going 5-11.
Yep. That's you with the practice reports.
You're right about that. But I'm very interested in seeing and like you say, you mentioned like the Richards and Schoonmaker and people like that. How about Hunter Lipke? Where do you see? Will immediately Hunter Lipke be like a one-back guy? Will they show formations and working together? And will he be a fullback? Will he be a move guy? We've heard a couple of things. you mentioned, we talk about Overshown, Fehoko, that 3 technique stuff.
Yeah. How much does his work look like tackle versus edge work?
Yeah. I mean, they've got a couple of guys too with Duriel Johnson. Physically, I think Duriel Johnson's going to look great. And Tyrus Wheat, who they got from Mississippi State. 2 of these guys I had on my draft board. It's 2 guys I had in my top 210. That were signed as free agents. So I think the interesting parts of this practice could be on that defensive side of the ball, as you mentioned, with Overshown, Fehoko, Johnson, Wheat, we'll see with Eric Scott. You'll be impressed with Eric Scott, 6'1", 197, the movement stuff. I think when you watch him go through drills, I think he'll be a pretty solid player for you to look at.
You are listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Audacy podcast. You can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian. So I'm going to run through some Cowboys buy or sell with you here. This is that I did on the morning show this last week. We had Jane Slater sitting in with Sean Sharif and I, and we went over these buy or sells on Friday. And I thought, you know what, these would be good to go over with Brian. So I got 5 statements here. And you're just going to tell me if you buy it, you think it's true, there's validity to it, or you're selling it, that you think that, that's not quite the case, there's some nuance there or whatever else. So the first one for you here, Brian, the statement, the defense now needs Leighton Vander Esch just as much as it once needed Sean Lee. Buy or sell?
I'm going to buy that because I think that Sean, when you start to talk about, I almost said Sean Lee, but you're asking me the question about Sean Lee. I think the thing with Leighton Vander Esch is that he does such a great job of not only knowing his assignments, but knowing everybody else's assignments. And when it was very clear last year when Damone Clark, when he got in the game and he had to play next to Leighton Vander Esch, it looked more comfortable. He didn't have the super productive that, I kind of felt like, but heck, the guy coming off, back surgery, I didn't think he was going to play at all. And for him to line up and play. But you could clearly see that when he was a better player, it was with Leighton Vander Esch in there. And, the one thing that Leighton Vander Esch does, it allows Micah Parsons to go be Micah Parsons as well. And it also gives you the opportunity to put a guy on the field when I'm talking about with Leighton Vander Esch that not only covers well, tackles well, sideline to sideline guy, all the things you wanted to say about Sean Lee, the smarts, the toughness, maybe even some of the point where, not always being completely healthy. I think that's something that those 2 guys share for sure. But there's just so many things that Leighton Vander Esch can do to help your defense and to help those around him.
Yeah, and I think that is Leighton Vander Esch the same caliber of player that Sean Lee was? No. But in terms of how it seems to affect this defense and how they just fall apart when he goes out of games, I think that's at least very similar and something that's, worth noting and worth figuring out if you can sustain a long-term absence from Leighton Vander Esch. Because right now I don't know that they can. There's questions at the linebacker spot all the way behind Leighton Vander Esch at this point. All right, next one here, Brian. Jalen Tolbert and Kelvin Joseph should both be on the bubble heading into training camp.
That's absolutely true. And especially I think with when you start to talk about Kelvin Joseph, but Kelvin Joseph, when you start to, as far as a potential rotational player, a guy that maybe gets in some sub packages, some nickels, some dime, this is really, really important for him. Now, the one advantage that Kelvin Joseph does have is he played well enough on special teams that they might just say, okay, he's a bust as a defensive back, but he is one of our better special teams players. So that's where he has a chance. Now, I honestly believe this. I think the Cowboys, they picked Jalen Brooks in the 7th round, and they had opportunity to grab some receivers, along the way. Even we talked about the potentially of Dallas maybe drafting one at 26, Dallas maybe drafting one at 58. We talked about these things. They didn't do that at all. And this is where I think that Jalen Tolbert, that factor comes into play. I don't think they wanted to do anything to put Jalen Tolbert at any risk right now. You get somebody else that comes in here. Now we'll see, but Brooks catches the ball well. We'll see. He's a really good special teams player. He was at South Carolina. Jalen Tolbert has got to prove that he can play special teams, but he could also be a productive receiver. So I think that his spot, there's a lot of people over there that are kind of like, they're covering their eyes, but they're kind of opening to see what's about to happen, like, oh no, what's going to happen here? Because they really thought Bobby, heck, you even reported it, 2 drafts ago about Jalen Tolbert. There was talks about, Jerry Jones. I mean, they were going to take him in the 2nd round, and Jerry Jones stepped in and said, no, we'll take Sam Williams and we'll come back around and see if we could get Tolbert. And they did. So there are some people in the organization, and feel free to jump in here and tell me if you're hearing anything different. But I kind of feel like that Jalen Tolbert has got that 1 foot in the parking lot and could have both feet in the parking lot if he doesn't show up and play well this summer.
Yeah, I think that if he has the same issues he had last year, which were almost not being able to handle the assignments, not knowing where to line up, like those are the issues heading into this training camp. If that's still an issue a year later, I don't think there's going to be a lot of patience for that. If that improved and we're just talking about growth as a player, I think that would buy him a little more time. I think that they would say, all right, he's improved this area. Now we just got to focus on growing him as a player. That we'll deal with this for a little bit while longer. But in terms of the actual, if he's got these same issues he was dealing with last year that kept him from being active the first week on a team that needed receiver help, you're looking at some trouble, I think, for Jalen Tolbert.
Yeah,
I love Jalen Tolbert coming out of school. I was a big fan of him out of South Alabama.
I was too. He didn't even look like the same player that showed. I mean, you look at the player at South Alabama.
There was no confidence.
None. Zero. And, the sad thing was that guys like a Dennis Houston was playing better than him. I mean, the fact that they thought more of Dennis Houston than they did. Now, I'll give you another guy. Simi Fajoko's another guy, too, if you want to honestly, and maybe even Turpin as well. As, there's several of these wide receivers that are kind of like 1 foot in the parking lot. Even though that Turpin had a really productive season last year, the addition – with the running back with Deuce Vaughn, that to me, that could spell trouble for Turpin for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, there's only so many under 5'8" skill players you can have on your roster before it starts feeling like a little bit of a duplicate. All right, next question here, Brian. Chuma Edoga will be the starter at left guard in week 1.
Man, that is usually say that's a really good question and buy you more time to think. But there's a side of me, and I want to believe the line coach here. And
Mike
Solari. I want to believe that Mike Solari really believes that Tyler Smith is a left tackle, but they've also, the whole thing with Tyron Smith is, and for them to get Tyron Smith, who already's contract for a starting tackle was already below market value, but he can't stay healthy. We all know that. That's the biggest thing. And to me, I'm like, I watched Tyler Smith play left tackle last year, and I'm like, why mess with him? Why try and play him at guard? Why? No, put Terrence Steele at right tackle. Terrence Steele has done incredible work. I know a couple of times I've been out there at the Star and watched him work. He's moving around well. We've seen him work with Duke. On Merriweather on the techniques and things like that. He looks good getting away from the line. If Terrence Steele and they're pretty much one of those teams that they're going to only put those guys out there, and they're going to work him in slowly, I believe is what they're going to do. But man, he looks, Steele and then Tyler Smith at tackles. It's kind of what I feel like your future is right now. I mean, now they might not be able to keep Terrence Steele, so maybe he isn't the future, and maybe that's where Awesome Richards comes in, or Matt Willetsko, or one of those kinds. personally, I've moved on from Josh Ball, but you asked me about Udoka, and I don't know. And I think that they're a lot more confident in Udoka's ability than I am right now. You know, that maybe Udoka is the starter at left guard, and then Tyler Smith is the starter at left tackle, and Tyron Smith is somehow, some way waiting in the wings, you know, with bubble wrap on him and being ready to go if something were to happen to Steele or happen to Tyler Smith. But they got Tyron Smith to take less money and make an incentive based by the way he plays. So they've obviously promised him an opportunity to do something. But to answer your question, I'm going to say that Udoka is not the starter at left guard. I know I went
but you don't feel totally comfortable with it, do you?
No, I don't, because I think that I said that whole thing about Tyron Smith and bubble wrap and all that, and I don't believe it. I don't believe what I just said. I really don't. I think that they feel like that Tyron Smith back at left tackle will be good for them, and putting Tyron Smith at left tackle and Tyler Smith at left guard, they probably feel like that's a good thing for them. But we could get in a situation where Udoka, he'll start at left guard because we'll get in training camp and something will happen to Tyron Smith. Yeah, that's usually the case.
Two more questions for you here, or two more statements for you here to see if you're buying or selling.
What did you decide on that? Do you think he's
buy? I'm buying that Udoka is the left guard starter.
Yeah,
I don't see why you mess with. I don't see why you mess.
I don't either.
A young player who showed special ability at left tackle. Question. I think they're publicly negotiating with Steele, and so I don't buy it. And Tyron's not going to play left guard, so I think Udoka at left guard makes sense. Next one here: Sam Williams will have more sacks in 2023 than DeMarcus Lawrence.
Wow. You know what? I am going to buy that. I'm going to buy that. I think we're starting to see the end of DeMarcus, and I think it's in a way of that DeMarcus takes so much pride of being a complete player.
Yeah.
And so playing the run is super important to him. And you know what? And the coaches respect that. The fact that he's able to knife down there inside, tackle guys behind the line of scrimmage. You still see that ability to pass rush. But I think this is where we start to see Sam Williams. Now Sam Williams might be a little crazy. You know what I'm saying? He might be a little crazy. He might be a little, kind of a hard guy to contain, off the field. Maybe he needs to mature a little bit more, and he probably will. But I just feel like he's got so much ability, and I feel like that these coaches are going to put him in a position to have more sacks, and that ability will show up. So I'm going to buy that Sam Williams will have more sacks than DeMarcus Lawrence.
I buy that too. I think DeMarcus Lawrence was last year, I think he had 6 sacks. You look at over the last 4 years of his career, I think 6.5 is the most he's had in a season.
That's kind of where I think he's at right now.
It's just not his game. He's complete, but he's not a dominant pass rusher anymore. He's an effective one, but he's not a dominant one.
He is not a dominant one, and he does a great job of being a complete player, and I think that's what this team really appreciates about him.
And finally, on Cowboys buy or sell, Brian, when Mike McCarthy says he wants to run the ball and lean on the defense, what he's actually saying is he does not trust Dak Prescott.
I'm saying that he doesn't. This is hard because if you
buy or sell, Brian, buy or sell.
What did you say? I want to hear what you go
buy.
first.
Buy.
You're buying on this.
Buy. I don't think Mike McCarthy, and I think that's wrong. I think it's wrong. I think it's misplaced, but I think McCarthy doesn't believe he can just lean on his quarterback, and I think that's wrong.
I think that Mike McCarthy is worried about his quarterback having to make all these reads and go. And I'm not saying that Dak works extremely hard on his game. He works probably the hardest worker in that building. There's no question. And I'm not trying to justify, anything here. I'm just trying to tell you that he has to work hard. He came from a system at Mississippi State, and along the way, this is his 8th year. And if Mike McCarthy has concerns about it, Mike McCarthy's saying, what he's saying is like, hey, I want to run the ball more because I don't trust him not turning the ball over, I mean, and then, and Dak will force the ball into some situations, but Dak's receivers have also got to help him along the way. But I think, by saying it, I think this is me, Bobby. I think there's more pressure on Mike McCarthy, Mike Solari, and Brian Schottenheimer than Dak Prescott. I think there's
organizational pressure.
Yes. I absolutely. I think we all understand what Dak is or who Dak is, but McCarthy, by moving on from Kellen Moore, moving on from Doug Nussmeier, bringing in Scott Tolzien, that's another thing. I know there was a question, a mailbag question about Scott Tolzien. We don't know what kind of quarterback coach Scott Tolzien is. He might be the next Matt Kafka. That's with the Giants. That was with Kansas City. We don't know that. He might be, but there is a lot of pressure on McCarthy and Brian Schottenheimer and Mike Solari. If they don't get this right, if this goes out there and Dak flops around and they don't get him to where he needs to be, I mean, that's going to be on those coaches. That is going to be on those coaches. And if that's the case, there's going to be people lining up to take this job.
Now, like I said, I buy that that's a lack of trust. I think that is what he's saying ultimately with it. But again, I want to be clear that I disagree with that. I think there should be a lot of trust in Dak Prescott. I think
nobody hates Dak. I mean,
no.
Everybody feels like you either have to like Dak or hate Dak. And I think that's, I don't think that's right. And to me, I respect what Dak Prescott, where he's come from to get to this point. I don't look at the money and all that stuff like people do. I really, really don't. They've won. I mean, look at the number of games they've won with him at quarterback. And people are critical, like, oh, playoff success. He went toe-to-toe with Tom Brady. They won that game. He played one of the best games you could ever see in the history of a playoff game for a Dallas Cowboys quarterback. Ever. One of the best ever. San Francisco, the last couple of years, it hasn't been good. But I put that on Kellen Moore. I put that on Mike McCarthy. You got to find a way. You can't give up the amount of points that they gave up and lose those games against San Francisco and the two times. You can't. So could Dak play better? Absolutely. Has he played better? Yes. See the Tampa game. That's a playoff game. See that Tampa game. Played great that day. That's what gave you hope going into the San Francisco game. San Francisco, look, they've got a rookie quarterback. Oh, Dak should be able to, should outduel a rookie quarterback, but it doesn't, but this is a team. This is really a team game. And, a lot of pressure is put on the quarterback because everybody sees how much money Dak makes.
You're listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Audacy podcast. You can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, it is now time for our Dean Julia Love of the Star mailbag. We dip into some questions from our dear, sweet listeners. First question here from Wink Marvel. Do you see any June 1 cut candidates on the roster right now? And I think to be clear here, a lot of times I think the Cowboys have, I don't think there are any June 1 cut players left on here other than the guys in training camp, because I think a lot of times when they make the decision to cut somebody June 1, they do it in
a fashion that you can kind of,
and then they designate them like they did with Zeke.
Yeah. I was talking to my guys around the league. I was talking to Gang of Seven because everybody's putting out names of guys. And if I could just, if you don't listen to us on 105.3, shame on you for doing that, by the way, because, there's some, but I know there were some guys. I'll give you some names. Okay. This Dalton Reisner from the Denver Broncos, right?
Yep.
Okay. Gang of Seven guy, descending player, grinded out, short range player, slow feet, slow on the move, struggles to bend, has to win with hand use, short area, and his toughness. Okay, that's an evaluator of Dalton Reisner, who a guy who's like, oh, they need a guard. Well, go get Dalton Reisner. Okay, well, that's what one of the guys in the league that does this for a living, that evaluates these players, kind of saw in Dalton Reisner. Okay, two other guys, William Jackson. Asked about William Jackson, right? The Was William Jackson. He was with
corner. He was with Cincinnati. Then he was with Washington. Yeah.
Okay. Jackson, another descending player. Best in press, physical versus the run, undisciplined in zone, holder, grabber, and coverage. A very up and down player. Okay. Okay. So that's that. People were asking about Kareem Hunt, the running back, right? From Cleveland Browns.
Who Jeff Glasgow, the running backs coach, I believe, worked with for a year in Cleveland.
Okay. There you got some familiarity with him, right? My guy says, number 2 back, strong and tough runner, good vision, good hands, good pass protector. Can't run, looked a step slow from his usual slowness. Okay. So that was that about those guys. Okay. I asked about, I had another guy that knew Robbie Gould, the kicker, really, really well. Okay. And so here's, and again, these aren't June 1 guys. These are just guys that are out on the street.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. But I'm just giving you an idea of what's on the street. Okay. Asked about Robbie Gould, right? I said, hey, Robbie Gould, what about him? And he goes, I asked this guy, I says, got anything left? And he goes, barely. Ideally, a team would have a punter who could handle the kickoff duty, so he doesn't have to. And he really doesn't want to attempt anything from 50 plus. So can't put a strain on the offense in fringe territory. Well, we know what Robbie Gould, he doesn't miss field goals in the playoffs, anything inside. Like, I think that on our show, Eric looked it up. I think he was like 5 of 11. Eric Chiafalo. What I said, I just said Eric, right?
No, you just said Eric. No, that people wouldn't know who he is.
Eric Chiafalo. Okay. Well, again, you should be listening to our shows and Bobby's show as well. But Eric looked it up, and I think I think he was 5 of 11 from 40 to 49 kind of numbers. So, that's what you're getting at right now. You're getting at guys that are descending players, but you never know. You might catch lightning in a bottle with one of these guys. So to me, I look at the second draft, and I call the second draft the waivers. When you look at waivers on after training camp, I think that's where you kind of can add a guy or two. I mean, I'm not, maybe, Kareem Hunt, if he's slower than slow, you just let go of a back that was slow, right? Yeah. Okay. So anyway, you got any names? I'm sorry. I just was rambling on there.
No. I think we answered the question right off the top, and then you given that there, I think that's good to flesh it out a little bit. Next question here from Jacob Lavers. He says, do you feel Ronald Jones is being a bit underrated in the running back room?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there was, hey, trust me, Bijan Robinson was my dream guy. I don't care. I just want to add players. Robinson, Gibbs. I appreciate Atlanta and Detroit. They, everybody that's a anti-running back guy, the fact that went in the top 12 did my heart's great. So, but I think with Jones, there's a certain amount of toughness there. There's a certain amount of, you watch him, when he was at USC, and you watch him when he was at Tampa, there's a certain amount of toughness to his game. Now, I'll say this though, we'll have to see when he gets into camp, and about how do they use these backs? Are they going to find a way to get a screen game going or get something going where these backs are factors? I remember the old Merrill Hodge, the edge matchup, the thing. And Merrill Hodge always talked about the factor back, who's going to be the factor back here? Who is going to be, and maybe Ronald Jones is that guy, or maybe it's Deuce Vaughn, but I don't know. I mean, sleeping on him maybe a little bit, because the guy's got some toughness. He sure does as a player.
Yeah, and we talked to Todd Archer on the morning show this last week. Sorry, snatched him out from under you guys at G-Bag Nation. But we talked to him, and he had mentioned there that, and Todd's very plugged in with what's going on with the Cowboys. He mentioned that he thinks that the organization is higher on Ronald Jones than probably the fan base is, and that the fan base have a recognition that he's a guy that they like. And somebody that absolutely can come in here and compete and be part of the running back rotation.
What are you hearing about Malik Davis then? See, because the big mystery about Malik Davis, and some of the whispers I was hearing, that Malik Davis maybe was a little bit at the end of the year was kind of like, what's my role here? What do I need to do? Why am I doing this? Why are you guys not using me kind of guy? Am I wrong about that? Did you hear some of the same things?
No, I don't think you're wrong. I think they still like him a lot. I think they think he's a really well-balanced all-around type of back. But I think they also feel like he's got some growing up to do as a pro. Maybe not as a person. Like, I don't think they believe he's immature in the same way that somebody like Kelvin Joseph is immature.
Right.
That they've had there. I think theirs is more like, hey, buddy, you got to learn like what being a pro means and what being a professional football player means and what preparation means. I think they feel like he needs to be better prepared entering games.
There you go.
And not just with his preparation for the game itself, but for his mindset and his approach. They want him to have a better approach, I think, heading into game weeks. And that's something that he's going to have to work on. But I do think they still like him. They're just waiting for him to do a little bit of growing up. Next question here from @CDolJS1. And Brian, I'm going to kind of adjust his question because he said, could the NFL do top 5 or top 10 projected draft picks when completing trades like the NBA does? I don't know if he's asking
like protected
ability now. Yeah. I don't know if he's asking, do you have that ability now, or more, could they look at that in the future? But I'm just curious, what would your thought be if you could bring that sort of thing into the CBA? Because I think it'd be a lot easier to give up a draft pick for an Amari Cooper if you say it's top 10 protected, though. And so we get that pick back, and I think it would open up some trades. So I don't hate this idea. I'd like to have top 5 and top 10 protected picks in the NFL.
There's so much I had to learn. I love the NBA. There's so much I have to learn. Matter of fact, my new project, I think I'm going to start looking at the NBA draft. You only have to look at about what? 60 guys. You kind of have to have
you only got to look at, I mean, for the Mavericks this year, you only got to look at 10, and that's if they keep
that's
it.
What I'm saying, man. But if you knew 60 guys, you'd be dangerous there. So, it's kind of, I think we're getting to a point though where player movement, I don't think is a problem now. I mean, the fact that people, trust me, Bobby, I wouldn't be. But
wouldn't you feel better about giving up that draft pick though?
Yeah, hell yeah. When we with 2 first-round picks for Joey Galloway, if one of them
you could have saved them.
We could have saved him because we gave up what was the 18th pick. We gave up the 18th pick, and then our next pick was the 7th overall pick. That would have been a protected pick.
Yeah,
we would have not lost.
Would have been good.
Pick. Yeah.
Yeah.
So see that, but I kind of feel like though we're starting to see more teams, and I wouldn't be on this podcast. I might be still working, in the NFL if we would have just found if Aaron Rodgers becomes available, Carr becomes available, the guy that gets available, all these quarterbacks become available.
Whoever.
Cousins. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing the number of quarterbacks that hell you had a chance. You had a chance to go get the guy at Baltimore if you really wanted him.
Lamar Jackson, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's what's amazing to me, that nowadays these teams are more willing. Well, look what Seattle did. Seattle parlayed the Russell Wilson trade into, look at the haul that they got for Russell Wilson. I mean, just think about that. And I think that people are more willing to move on from players than they have been in the past.
That does it for us here today on the Love of the Star podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll be back later this week with another episode, a little bit of a more in-depth rookie minicamp preview, get to some of your additional questions. We got a lot of them today. We ran out of time. We're unable to hit them all. But this is summer season. This is where we'll dive into some more big picture topics, I think, moving forward. Because like I said, we're out of the draft now. And maybe we'll get Brian's NBA draft scouting report on Cam Whitmore, the forward from Villanova.
Any Villanova player, that's a champ. That's championship basketball right there. Jalen Brunson proved that to you, the Dallas Mavericks. You should have kept that guy.
Yeah, they blew that one. Look, if you're in a position to take Cam Whitmore and you're the Dallas Mavericks, make the pick. We'll bring more NBA scouting reports to you as we go forward, though.
And I think we got the schedule coming out here real soon, Bob.
Yes,
I think
we'll have schedule reaction as well.
Yeah,
I believe we get that Thursday is when it'll be.
Go.
So we'll have some discussion there. Until next time, we will talk to you guys later. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest updates. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.